let me explain something just real quick. I had another video. I had another video open. I had a video of it was a real zeros and ones moment.
Exactly.
I had
2 zeros, 2 ones.
Can you guys handle that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what are your names? Ingrid, Kai, and Samuel. Hey guys.
That's good.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for showing
me.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us for the second coming of Zeros and Ones second coming in Australia.
Yeah, and let me also say, everyone who stayed up, I know it's like 4 a.m. or whatever over there. Thank you.
3:15. Yeah.
That's cool.
Gotta respect it.
Love all the psychos. Good.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure, as everyone's wondering, is just like, where did this come from? Where did this mess of screens and shit like come from? How does that as a debut feature, how do you be like, I want to make this?
Okay. So I made a short in 2006 called Zeros and Ones that was like, okay, every movie is gonna be just like a bunch of screens and text and phones and all this shit all the time. That's gonna be the future of movies, obviously, and so I'm gonna do that. So I did that in a really primitive way, and like someone asked in the chat, and that was probably in like Final Cut 5 or 6. And I put that together. That was just like by myself with some friends and stuff. Then I moved to LA when I was 21, and for like probably a year and a half, I did like just a bunch of PA jobs and was like very hungry and poor. And one of the coolest thing that probably happened is that I worked with Anya Varda. She got me a job working kind of on softcore pornography. And while I was working on softcore pornography, I met this guy named Michael, and we started writing these like softcore porn scripts for this guy, Zalman King, who is like a bit of his own sort of weirdo.
She's Zalman King.
Yeah, shout out, rest in peace, Zalman King. Anyway, so then Michael said, what are you going to do with all of your money from these softcore porn scripts, which of course we never made any money from? And I said, look, I have to make this movie. I'm dying to make this movie, Zeros and Ones. It's about, it's basically told through computer language. And I pitched him on it, and he said, yeah, cool, I'll give you all my porn money too, that we never got. And anyway, so we both quit, and we both decided to do it, and that was like in 2008. And then everyone came out and volunteered for the shoot. Mostly friends of mine from East Coast came out, and we had a few people from West Coast, and we shot. And so, you know, this is kind of in an era where things were first starting to get embedded. Like, oh, you were starting to embed you were starting to see YouTube embedded places. And I was like, okay, that'll be like kind of the logic for how we integrate video into the movie at the end. So we filmed everything with 5 cameras. And I was like, we're going to embed simultaneous video throughout the film, and we're going to have multiple angles up at the same time. So like in this sort of like, it was almost like a Wellesian Renoir, let's say like more like a Renoir-ish concept of like letting people choose, you know, what to look at on screen without cutting. And even though they're in the end product, there are obviously scenes that are cut up through like intrusions and stuff like that. The idea was actually to just do a perfect take and let the scene play out in a long take, but in multiple windows. And then maybe in some of those windows, you could then cut angles, but you let the take kind of like play through. So it was definitely, the intent was to say, we're gonna do these long scenes. One thing that Michael and I, the other producer, we, in probably 2007, late 2007, we went to go see all of these Bellatar films at the LACMA, the museum here, when it was still showing movies. Sadly, that's over now. And, you know, those long takes in the Bellatar films, and it was really inspirational. And I said, there's like a new way to explore that language, you know, because I was vaguely familiar with like Pedro Costa and Tai Ming Liang and stuff like that. And I'd seen those films. I was like, this is like, to me, it was very boring, that style, like the slow cinema style. And then I was like, okay, we can do that, but like, let's put a bunch of shit on screen. Let's give people different angles so that they're kind of doing the montage with their eyes, you know? And I felt like everyone was doing that already, like on, you know, initially in AOL, but then as all the shit morphed in all those other environments. And so it just seemed really natural to want to tell a story like that. Very convoluted way of kind of answering your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it picks up on other questions I had about just like how many cameras you had and how the shooting worked, because like, yeah, at some points I could spot 5 different angles of this one thing, and I was like, how, this is amazing.
So yeah, what were those cameras? They were this Panasonic DVX 200s, I think, something like that. It had those P2 cards. I don't know if anybody remembers any of this shit. The guy's name was Marcus Gillis. That was the DP. It was a weird hybrid. Also, like, I learned so much making the movie, like, in terms of what to plan and what not to plan. Like, okay, for instance, to me, kind of the biggest coup in the movie is the high school reunion party, because that was the thing where I was like, what would a high school reunion party that takes place in 2008, but that throws back to like 2003 or 2004 be like? And I was like, oh, it would just be like AOL, right? So like entering the party would be like that stupid login screen. How do you enter a party? You do a shotgun of beer or whatever with this crowd, you know, because the crowd is supposed to be like kind of this like suburban, ex-urban, like middle lower class, like, you know, background, whatever. And then what happens when you enter the party, right? You like survey all the people, right? So you do a tracking shot. But what's like an AOL tracking shot? Oh, it's like everyone's a waymaster. It's just like all the things just made sense, right? You, like a tracking shot essentially is scrolling down your buddy list, right? And when you scroll down and when you walk into the party and do a tracking shot, no one wants to talk to you. And it's like when you do the buddy list, you're just looking at everyone's away messages and stuff. And it's like when you're in a room with multiple people, it's like being in a chat room. And when you're like with someone one-on-one, it's like having just like an AIM conversation with them and stuff. So that, to me, that was all planned out, and that was the most planned out sequence in the film. And to me, that's like the best in terms of just like execution and like the formal qualities, and also just like what's happening there. And yeah. A lot of the other scenes, like for instance, like the Doom scene or whatever, something like that, like we didn't know that was going to be like a Doom scene, you know. It just after we were in the edit, I was like, it's so grimy in there. And we were in the, you know, Mario world. We were going to different levels or whatever, which we did kind of think about, like the lake and the Mario, like that'll be like this, you know. So we just decided, oh, Doom, you know, it's like he's doomed, and like the baby that he sees at the end could like attack him, because we'd had the scene edited essentially before the design of it. There was like a whole rough edit I did all by myself. Then we got this guy Andrew Schwartz involved that Michael had met at like a weird 3D projection mapping classical music concert or something. And Andrew is a psycho in the best way, you know, the best of times, worst of times sort of thing. And he was just like, yeah, I've been wanting to make a movie like this forever. Like, I can do it by myself. And we believed him because he's super charismatic, and he had actually like was one of the lead compositors on Final Fantasy, which was like, you know, the first all CGI movie when he was like 21 years old. So it was like, oh my God, like we're so lucky to like meet this guy who's like brilliant and like wanting to do this already, blah, blah. And then we worked with Andrew, and then actually a whole army of people, volunteers, really, for 3 years. I mean, it took us basically 2.5 years in post to finish this movie, because every single scene, like the Doom scene, like the ALL scene, had to be designed from scratch. We didn't know anything really about copyright law, and we couldn't afford a lawyer. So I was like, we should just make everything we should just make a parody of everything that's out there, which is also like a big lesson, you know, too, because why? You know, like you don't have to. But we did, and it was cooler that way. And this actually speaks to your other question, and I know I'm rambling, so just stop me. But like, because we got so many people involved, and because everyone was kind of volunteering their time and working for free, and like, I mean, it boggles my mind. It like humbles me, and I feel so blessed. And the movie is blessed because of it. People had their own aesthetics. You know, like people, like I said, oh, let's make this like Doom, let's make this like Solitaire, right? But like he's horny, you know, like roll with that. He's really horny, and if it's a game of Solitaire. Everyone had their different aesthetic sensibilities, and I'm not gonna like shit on someone's aesthetic sensibilities when they're like volunteering their time. I might critique it, I might push it in a certain direction, but I'm not gonna be like, oh, start over or something, or oh, this really doesn't work. So the movie ends up becoming this like conglomerate of like these different aesthetics of the VFX post artists. And in that way it becomes, and this was always kind of built into it, like archival, right? It becomes like archaeological. And so you have this like survey all the way from like, you know, like a GeoCities type thing where like, you know, you have the Becky page, which is like, you know, here's Becky's flower page, and it's like GeoCities, all the way to like whatever the most recent thing in that moment would be, which is probably like a BlackBerry, you know. So in that way, a lot of the aesthetic comes from the means of production, or like the lack of means of production, where everybody's sensibility kind of comes to the foreground. And then you say the pastiche is the coherence in a way, you know.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, your rambling is perfect because it's answered all these questions that I've got
without
me
even being
asking
asked, and questions in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at the chat right now.
So yeah, so Kai asked me before in the chat, and he was like, "How would?" Because he's like, "Oh, you know, Screen Life." I'm like, "Sure," but like, how would you define this aesthetic? I know you just talked a bit about that, but like, how does this compare to something like Unfriended in your eyes?
Well, okay, here's the thing. So Russell, one of the volunteers, Russell Sadegpour, who we became very close on the project. He literally answered an ad on Craigslist. It's like crazy to think about how people came on board the project. And the ad was like, hey, looking for volunteers. It was, it's ridiculous. And Parker Laramie, who kind of like informally AE'd on this very late in the game, like trying to make sense of the scenes, bring them into the edit, and then who I worked with on my next project. Russell was the head VFX person on Unfriended, and Parker was the editor. So like 4 years basically after we made our movie, those guys got hooked up with Timur Bekmambetov and that whole company, and they, you know, helped figure out, I don't want to say the language, because who knows who on that side figured it out, but the logistics. They definitely helped figure out the logistics of how that movie would work. Yeah, I mean, I think on a formal level, it's pretty different, but on a conceptual level, I don't know, it's the first thing I think in terms of narrative filmmaking that really wanted to do that, you know, like really wanted to bring the language of the computer and of the way that our like digital lives sort of overtake our actual lives, but not just in a like plot sense, like the net or something like that, in a visual and formal and cinelinguistic, whatever, I don't know, that's some fake thing I just, you know, but sense, you know. Yeah, so in that way it's related. My new movie is kind of like taking the lessons from this movie, and also everything I don't like about what Screen Life became, and trying to like push it forward even more, because the new movie is like a live stream, and it's mostly takes place on phones. It's more all mobile and stuff.
Can you speak on what things about what Screen Life has become now that you're not a big fan of?
Well, I think like Unfriended 2 is a really perfect example. I was just like, why are these loser ass like 28-year-old millennials like Skyping with each other? Like, it makes a little bit more sense in the Zoom Corona world that we live in now, where like everyone's been sort of like reacclimated to the idea of like computer-based video chatting. But basically for most of the 20 teens, especially the late 20 teens, no one is video chatting in this way. Maybe people are FaceTiming or something. But so like in the original Unfriended, where you have a bunch of teenagers essentially video chatting in like the early 20 teens, that makes sense. They're fucking teenagers, they're like whatever, they're caught up in this fucking shit. Fine, that makes sense. But like to do it in this like we're 26, we're 27, and we're like have a game night, virtual game night or something. I don't know, it just feels stupid. Searching, which I think is like pretty well executed, it's just like a toothless movie. Like it's just like literally without the formal qualities of it, is like a Lifetime movie or something. And so I was just like, this is so soft. And so, you know, my movie is basically like, there's no video chatting in my new movie in this way. And although I think now, like especially right now, you could easily make a movie like this. And I'm sure there are a bunch of bozos trying, and maybe one of those bozos is really good, you know, and hopefully they are. But yeah, so there's no like this, and my movie is very hard. You know,
I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited.
I'll say one other thing. If people like zeros and ones, so like I kind of walked you guys through that process of making it. And I have to say, it was also like, while like I look back on it being like, oh my God, it's so amazing that everybody did that, I was really frustrated with it. And like, you could kind of hear me in the chat where I was like, oh, we cut this scene, we cut all these scenes because I was scared that the movie would be boring. And I think probably 25% of those scenes that I cut were actually really good. There's like one scene especially that haunts me at the ALL party where Cole and James are talking, and Cole says this thing about what he does every day. And he talks about how he wakes up in the morning and he like goes on Pitchfork, and he like checks his email 100 times. Then he goes to NewYorkTimes.com and and he walks through his day online. And then he's like, I go to sleep feeling like shit, and then I wake up and I do the same thing all over again. And like, I'm really sad that I cut that, because I think it was really like accurate and prescient, and like people would have felt it. Anyway, I was very, felt really like, not suicidal, but like very frustrated and anxious about what was happening with the film, because so many other people were getting involved, and I knew that I needed the film needed their involvement, but it was like diluting what the movie was about to me. So I made another movie while we were all making zeros and ones called Skydiver, which is actually like a screen grabbed movie that I made for literally no money, and that I was filming conversations that I was having with people, and I was playing a character who slowly became like a domestic terrorist, and no one who I was talking to knew that I was filming them or that I was acting. And so that is a movie that's online, that's on my website and stuff. So if people like zeros and ones or are interested in screen life, I would recommend they watch that, because that also predates whatever Unfriended by 4 years, but is like more dealing with the limitations of the actual screen grabbed aesthetic, and trying to figure out how to leverage those limitations into an interesting aesthetic. Zeros and ones is like weirdly irrelevant and visionary, like simultaneously in this way. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't deal with the formal limitations of like real time, or, you know, it's different. It's like, it's a different thing. Hopefully, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay, now go. Sorry, shorter answers.
No, it's perfect. You're literally ticking every single box.
I wanted to throw in a question from the chat, if I may, Sam.
Go for it.
Someone to ask about, I guess, whether you have a personal affection or what you think is special about the sort of early internet, early 2000s Web 1.0 aesthetic that you wanted to mirror, I guess, is particularly contrasted with homogenous nature of like Web 2.0 kind of world.
Yeah, it was all interesting to me, right? So like, a few things. One, while I hadn't seen like movies, actually, it's gonna be a long answer. Anyway, I think it was all interesting, right? So I do remember explicitly, like while we were in the edit, Tumblr became a thing. I probably had like literally one of the first Tumblr accounts is like a zeros and ones account that for whatever reason I co-opted into my own account like afterwards, and then never updated. But you know, like everything pre-Tumblr, everything was interesting. You know what I mean? Like AOL is like such an interesting idea to think about, that like it gave you internet access, but you stayed in this weird sandbox and you did, you know what I mean? And like GeoCities, you know, like something like that is super interesting. And just like, you know, this is on the cusp of like away from MySpace into Facebook, predating Instagram and all that stuff. So you felt the like homogenous or the template, you know, like in when there's the Friendsler page where he's where, you know, that whole thing where she's dead and stuff, that was also about this, like, you know, onset. I could see the onset of conflation of people's identity with their virtual, you know, sort of page, or their virtual identity with their like real world investment in themselves, you know. But on the bottom of that Friendsler page is like, which font template do you want to use here? And there's like 6 different fonts you could use. Everything about it seemed obviously like so the actual early internet seemed really DIY, with like the delusional projection of like, this is official, like this is just the way it has to be, like we've coded it like this, and like this is the look, like this is the way it's going to look forever. And it's just like one guy or like 30 people or whatever, or like whoever in like some room being like, I'm gonna come up with this. It just blows the mind. And now that it is like so, you know, whatever, Tumblr gets bought by Yahoo and AOL Time Warner and all, you know, all these shits are just part of like huge conglomerates, and the biggest conglomerates in the world are like these mega tech think tank whatever. Yeah, it's gonna become all standardized, and you know, and money, all the money's there, so everything has to just funnel into like data sets and algorithms and shit. And yo, watch out for TikTok, guys. Or I mean, you know, anyway, that's irrelevant. I was gonna say something totally unrelated.
No, go for it if you feel like it's relevant.
Okay, this is what I was gonna say. Everyone's freaking out about TikTok or whatever. Do you guys remember like the Cambridge Analytica thing? Like a few years ago, and everyone was like, I can't believe it, they were like fucking using our data, and like we need to kill these Cambridge Analytica guys. I'm like, what have you guys been opting into and signing up for the last 10 years? It's like you literally are out there so thirsty, desperate for people to like watch everything you do, and now when some company comes along and literally watches everything you do so that they can exploit you, you're like, this is fucking illegal, like this is fucked up, I can't believe this company. It's like, you're literally begging for it, you thirsty losers. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know? So, anyway, yeah. I mean, zeros and ones, I think, is explicitly... I mean, the thing that made me sad about the movie, and that I learned, too, is, like, the technology moves really fast in the real world. So you can never actually make a contemporary story about what's going on, so we like backdated the movie 2006 during the post of it, because originally it's just supposed to take place in 2008, and I was like, no, this is like doesn't make any sense. And literally every single movie I've made that features, which is all of them, that feature technology, somewhere in the movie, unless it's like in the foreground, like my new movie, it's in the foreground, somewhere in the movie is like a date, so that anybody watching at any point in history could be like, oh, okay, the reason the phones are like this, or the apps are like this, or whatever, is because it's this moment in history, because this shit like really morphs.
And you kind of come back around again. You've like, watching it now, it's wild to me how much this is kind of e-girl, e-boy aesthetic nostalgia for that time, from kids who are, you know, 10 years old using MySpace for some reason, and have this kind of nostalgia for precisely what you're replicating in the film.
Yeah, there's a compression of nostalgia like now, right? Because things disappear so quickly, because there's no, in the virtual environment, the landscape changes so quickly, and things that are like a flash in the pan, you know, a lot of things that are flash in the pan still have like a weird pocket of impact that they make in your memory for 3 months or 3 years or whatever.
We've been we're talking about like even mentioning stuff about like short-term, like small pieces of content, and the way, like, I mean, you mentioned TikTok earlier. Someone in the chat wants to know what you think of like Quibi and as that concept. I mean, even in zeros and ones, there's a lot of, I mean, there's basically a lot of very episodic, a lot of short stories. I mean, do you think that Quibi was bound to fail from the start? What are your general thoughts?
Quibi, like, I see your recording, so I'll put this on the fucking record. Quibi was bound to fail from the start because I had a fucking meeting there, and I didn't meet with all of the execs, but those people were fucking lost. They didn't get what could be cool about it. Like, if I was fucking running Quibi, I would figure out who's cool on like Vine and TikTok and YouTube, I guess, but depending not who had like a huge audience, but you could do that too. Like, if someone was popular on Vine or popular on figure out who had a narrative sensibility from those people who are actually popular and give them money to make a show. You don't want to bring in like loser ass celebs and like third-rate filmmakers who should just be making like episodes of like third-tier TV shows into a space that's like could be really experimental and could be really and should be really entertaining. And basically, young people or people who use those platforms natively understand how to make shit interesting for those platforms, and maybe some advanced filmmaker sensibilities like me would understand how to make that shit interesting for just a casual viewer. But you can't graft on like kind of stale sensibilities of like narrative or like reality TV or whatever the fuck they were thinking into a format that demands different forms, a different style of attention and a different style of entertainment. So yeah, I think the way that they figure the content that they came up with for that $1 billion operation was doomed to fail. But in general, I do think that the hacker-ish sensibility of like freedom, information should be free, has obviously spread natively to all Gen Z and most millennials of like torrenting and like just like there's a reason like fucking TikTok and Vine don't cost money. Like there's no paywall, like, because people don't expect this shit to cost money. And so they're okay with like looking away during advertisements or whatever. So just even like Quibi, 2 weeks free and then trial or whatever, that's old. Like I actually noticed someone said something funny in the chat when I woke up, and the first comment I saw was, no donation to the wear. And I thought that was like funny, like, to not, that was on purpose, right? That's like a joke.
That was a joke. That was me fixing myself for constantly every DLC is like, please. I'm like, no, not today.
Well, like I wish, but guess what? Like I'm broke. I know you're broke, and I'm glad you put in the time to make this wear. But like I ain't broke over here consuming content and trying to make my own shit with no money, And like I hope some whale of some rich person comes and sees your wear and gives you money, but it can't be me. Sorry, And that is like kind of the economy that we were raised on, right? Like there's the attention economy that the internet created, and then there's the we're all broke, so we're gonna do everything for free. We're gonna consume everything for free, and it becomes this like cycle where wow, everyone's getting broke because we're doing this. We're actually, oh my god, everyone's getting broke because we're sitting in front of the computer all the time or on our phones all the time. Got to pay the phone bill or the Wi-Fi bill, but we're all broke, like because we're all doing it. And what were we talking about?
I think we're talking about Quibi, and you were spitting truths about Quibi.
Quibi had $1 billion, so I wish they'd given it to Static Visions and.
Did you go into the room with them with like ideas? What you basically something along the lines?
I did.
Of
yeah, I had a good idea. Someone said, "Oh, like Eugene's movies are like Bret Easton Ellis, or for instead of for Gen Z. I think they meant instead of for Gen X." I've actually never read any Bret Easton Ellis. I think maybe my new movie Spree has some things that it shares with American Psycho, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a satirical sensibility or something like that. I think that a lot of artists over time share. Like how do you observe your culture? I mean, watching, whatever part of the movie I watched, there's also like a lot of critique of like sort of early 2000s morality in there, like sort of hipster morality, if you want to call it that, which is like kind of like the forerunner to woke morality, the morality in that movie, or the morality that the movie was making fun of, would probably be canceled now. but it also was wrong then, I thought.
Yeah, the discussions about what slurs are appropriate is just very kind of Vice Mag era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the thing was that, yeah, like exactly, he's trying to legitimize the slurring by like putting him into the identity group against his own will, and the guy's like rejecting it. Or the thing where the old grandpa man says that the boyfriend is black and is like completely like explicitly racist, but then when the boyfriend shows up, James like doesn't want to like investigate him because he doesn't want to align himself with the racist guy, but that also weirdly is like inherently racist. He does not even ask him the question that he's asking all of these non-black people, like, you know, just these like sort of like gradations of like morality. Now the one like joke in the movie that we like had to keep intruding upon, and I don't know if I think it's correct now, was just that the punchline of every single scene was like, then he asked them if they stole his computer. and no, but we've like intruded upon it. But in the original version, it was about that repetition. There's almost like a proto, you know, the structure is episodic or picaresque. Like that's how I was thinking about it. Like, you know, it goes from like this chapter is here and this chapter, it's like, you know, like whatever, like Don Quixote, Candide, something like that. But there was a meme. There's like a proto meme quality to it too, where like he's literally like, it's just the same punchline with like a different image, you know? And I pushed against that because I thought the movie's already so like annoying, and because there's all this shit going on and you're overwhelmed by it, that I thought we had to like tamp down the repetitious quality of the narrative, which maybe I should have kept it. I don't know. I'm a very compromised artist. I'm a very like, you know.
There was a question in the chat about that. Somebody actually wanted to ask, do you feel like you're becoming more assertive as you work on new projects and new films, given how adaptive and collaborative you were during the filmmaking process for Zeros and Ones?
Am I more assertive? I'm like really anxious and a control freak. So like my new movie is like probably my first like real movie, and then I have like a budget and like big actors and blah blah blah. But the other movies I made, probably Zeros and Ones is like my biggest movie up until my new one in terms of the number of people. The movies I made in between were literally just like me and my friends, under 6 figures, you know. We shot them all in 5 days, 6 days, edited them in a month and a half because there's no money. And, you know, I'm just very involved in everything. So even now, we're about to unleash this sort of like meta, hopefully viral promo campaign for the new movie. It's called Spree. The new movie is called Spree. I'm like editing all of the promotional material because like there is money to like hire someone. Just like, no, like, because then what? Then I'm going to be sitting here worried all the time about how it's not funny or it's not good or it's like the wrong vibe. And the movie is so specific. Like it's very provocative, the new movie. And so to figure out the right way to market something so that there's not like a pylon against satire is extremely difficult in all eras and in all societies. But I think in the current moment, it's really hard, not because of any sort of like moral situation, but just because what satire is, right? It's like, hey, look at this fucked up thing. Let's make fun of it. And the era that we live in is like, you know, it's tweets, it's clickbait, right? So the clickbait is always, hey, look at this fucked up thing. You know, so you lose. There's so much potential to lose the punchline in satire, which is like, we're here making fun of this thing because everyone is just so concerned with like depiction is endorsement or something. And it's like, that's literally, how can you make fun of something without depicting it, you know? And the role of the artist, right, is to like reflect, whether that mirror is a funhouse mirror or like clarity. The role of the artist is to reflect. And so you have to reflect the things that you make you uncomfortable and that make the world uncomfortable, because otherwise what are we doing? Just patting each other on the back or something.
Yeah, awesome. How are we doing for time? Because I've got one
Run late.
question to
Yeah, run late, Sam. You got smart questions. Go in there.
No, it's just a personal question.
Personal?
No, I mean, not like if I want to know. Because I saw that Josh Ovalle is in Spree, and I'm interested how that casting came about, because he's like a Vine, like Instagram superstar.
That has to do with Honor. That Honor was the social media consultant on Spree, so she alerted me to the fact that Josh Kennedy was his Vine name, right? Was really like funny and amazing. And we have this character, I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but there's a character named like Bobby, who's like a big influencer. And she said, you should cast Josh. And I said, who's Josh? She showed me. I said, it's so funny. We figured out a way to contact him. And he was down. Like he literally came over. We did, like, I have this, like crappy studio apartment. We did the audition on my phone and his phone for the scene, his main scene in the movie. I said, text me the footage. He texted it to me. I edited that day. This is like audition tape where we had like 2 screens up at the same time of the 2 phones. And I said, he's so good. This is so good. And then literally 9 months later or whatever, 6 months later when we did the movie, it was almost identical, except, with the lead actor and costumes and then like a really funny ass influencer house. But Josh is great. And he actually himself is a talented filmmaker, I think. Like he's been making videos on YouTube recently, and he's trying to discover an aesthetic too. He is very, I think like the main thing with all of these things, and I can always kind of tell, especially with these screen movies, because it's like whatever, but if you have like a love for cinema and you have like a deep knowledge for cinema, you will be motivated to come up with new forms and new aesthetics and stuff. And obviously it depends on what type of cinema you like, and like what you like to watch is obviously going to be similar to what you like to make and stuff. But anyway, Josh does love movies, and so he's trying to figure out how to take a very hyperactive and kind of like choppy anti-narrative aesthetic, which has taken hold, I think, in a lot of Gen Z stuff, and turned it into something where he could tell a story. And so he's working that out, I think, and hopefully he figures it out, because we will all benefit.
Yeah, because when you were talking about the Quibi thing, I was like, this is the person that knows what's funny in this format. And his like stuff with like Casey Fry on Instagram is just like hilarious. Like the amount of times I've watched it is ridiculous. Like,
he's great.
On something like that.
The thing that I pitched to Quibi was like it was supposed to be kind of like Rashomon-esque thing that featured different platforms that gave a different, like it was the concept was basically that the social media platform is the massage, to like quote Marshall McLuhan or whatever. Like the way that the platform that mediates the way that we get our information is actually determining the perspective of the information, was kind of like the theory. And so it's going to be like this Rashomon thing on a college campus that had all these different forms that revolved around like a sort of like controversial thing that happened on the campus. And I'm still like trying to make that into a movie. It's just that the Quibi people like, whatever, fuck them. Whatever. I mean, you could, honestly though, all this stuff is, most people won't get this right. And all this stuff is inherently experimental. Like for Spree, I met with like 40 companies and they all were like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And the script was super conventionally written and stuff. It's awesome. And then no one wanted to make it. They literally took a random person with a lot of money who had do nothing about movies and just liked my movies to be like, okay, I believe in this. So it's like, no one is ever going to go for this thing. Even searching, from what I know, those guys did that almost by themselves. They made the movie first by themselves. Then they took it to Teamer and stuff. And that's already a company that's dealing with screen life. So this is such a I don't know. Companies are here, LA, Hollywood, and in general, film is such a conservative medium in terms of formal ideas. They really undervalue the audience. They really have no respect for the fact that people could be excited by things that look new, as long as the story and the characters are there. Like, people don't care. As long as things are coherent, people want new shit. As long as it's coherent and like has some core of entertainment, people are so hungry for new forms, you know? But usually the problem, what happens is that the filmmakers and the artists who are interested in new forms are not interested in entertainment. So the people who have money are scared of new forms, because anytime they've been exposed to new forms, it is usually experimental or willfully avant-garde, you know? And I do think in some ways maybe that's changing, maybe it's not, but that is definitely, I think, where a lot of the resistance people have had to my work, and, you know, not, you know, whatever. Even programmers, even film festival programmers, like Zeros and Ones only got into one film festival, you know?
Criminal. Absolutely criminal.
So.
Yeah.
And it didn't even get into the one I really wanted to get into was called Migrating Forms. It was like what the New York Underground Festival became or whatever, or it became part of the New York Film Festival later. And like, they didn't put that in. And I'm like, don't you understand? Like, this is the thing. Like, this is like, I'm not even talking about Sundance. I'm talking about like something that's dedicated to formal thing. But see, the thing for them was that it was talking about these it was like immoral probably. You know, it was too much like, oh, this is just about a bunch of bros or something. Like, they actually couldn't see it was like satirical and all this stuff. So I could see that's where they went with it. Whereas like a place like whatever, South by or Sundance would just be like, this is fucking, what is this weird shit? Put this in an art film festival. Okay, you know? So whatever.
I mean, it's even like Timur Bekmambetov, I've never asked it, but even like the movie the last screenlight movie he did, Profile, like, which I don't know if you've seen it, but like it hasn't been released. Like, it played a few film festivals and then seemingly got, I don't know, mixed reviews and not a good audience reaction. And they just like buried it, and that's like from the company that does this basically.
What, so you've seen it? I want to see it. Is it good? Like, the subject is good. Like, right? It's a journalist, and she's trying to like investigate ISIS and like joins ISIS.
I think it does tweaks on the format that are very interesting.
There was a moment where I was going to make Spree with Basilev's, that company. The movie is about how influencers and mass murderers are driven by the same thing, which is this attention that we are all like enslaved to right now, and how all of these social media platforms and stuff like make attention the bottom line. And when attention is the bottom line, all morality fails. All systems of morality fail when attention is the bottom line, because it becomes the economy, and the economy becomes survival, and survival becomes your identity. And when survival becomes your identity because you're looking for attention, anything goes. And that's a really scary ecosystem for humanity to be in, and something that you can't trust like a Hollywood studio to like allow you to talk about, you know, because they're in the attention game too, kids, you know.
I'm not sure if you can reveal any of the release stuff with Spree in Australia.
Yeah, I think it's coming out through Vertigo Entertainment or whatever the equivalent is to that.
Yeah, so that's going to be Rialto, I think, has just signed the big deal
Rialto.
with them. So, yeah.
Is that a good, I don't know, is that a good company? Is that
They're
legit?
a good company. It follows
Okay.
and Green Room.
I'm glad. I think in August. I don't know what day, but someday in August it'll come out. So take your friends and, you know,
Awesome.
whatever, VOD or you guys have movie theaters there, right? Because it's like chill or no?
They've just closed them in Melbourne, but I don't know. Come August, we might be good.
There's one in Sydney that might be opening up around the end of August, start of September kind of time. So
one potentially run by someone in this chat.
Wow, that'd be awesome. Can I go like this? Does it point to you?
That's perfect.
I think so.
We might have to call it to get back on schedule and pick up some time here.
What you're doing, donate to the Static Vision Wear, you know, fun. Appreciate everybody who stayed up.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for coming and joining us again.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.